They are pulling the Western countries right down to the bottom. There's no doubt about it. And the US just has to finish off paying taxes, sending drones across the world to bomb folk and making missiles and so on, and supplying the military and the taxes that go with it all. They're just going to finish off a few countries across the world, and that's the last job they got left for them. There's no work to go home to. And that they're pulling the plug from underneath them, the rug from under their feet as they do it all. I've said this was their technique for years. Why? Because it's been done before in history in other countries. Now, I'll go to the calls now, and there's Derek from Pennsylvania. Are you there, Derek?
Hi there, can you hear me?
I can,
Surprised, Alan. It's actually Clarence. I'm a friend of Derek's.
Yep.
And I first of all wanted to say, I saw Order of Chaos. It was an incredible movie. It's, very vulgar, very new agey, in that or new age morality, rather. But it's an incredibly good movie, and I just wanted to say that. And if anyone wants to check it out, they really should. But, it's not something they should give to their kids, because
that's right.
I'm sure you could say that.
Actually, their children now probably have seen worse at school.
Yeah, right?
I'm not kidding you.
Yeah. I can relate. I also wanted to say, you're talking about, in the beginning of the show, you talk about how you need a little extra change. Mm-hmm. So if people could, people who have more, I personally am broke. I've been thinking about sending you a few quarters, at the end of the month in my bank account, but anyone who has more, they could really help out, and it would be helping me and all the others who are listening as well. Maybe if someone wants to send you a question over the web, maybe send you a couple quarters or something.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You could talk about it for a little while.
Yeah, that's right.
That was just on my mind. And I wanted to ask you a few questions after the introduction. Stanley Kubrick, I'm sure you have opinions on him.
Oh, yeah.
I actually saw Full Metal Jacket recently. Again, I'd seen it when I was younger, but I never saw it with a discerning glance. And he actually hails Satan in that movie. Have you heard of that? Like, full on.
What did you say?
I'm sorry.
What did you say there?
Oh, he hails Satan in the movie. In one of the backdrops, one of the Vietnamese sayings in the back. Have you heard of that?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was blown away, and there's just so much you could talk about on that issue. The whole concept of the soldiers. It seems like they're going through a satanic, like a metaphor almost of the elite's religion, in that they're the destruction of your conscience into a psychopath. And it kind of, they also, take snipes at the dumb soldiers, how they, born to kill. And one of them actually says, "Has I am become God?" The character named Animal Mother.
Yep.
Yes, I am. That was Oppenheimer, actually, but I see it kind of like a little snide joke.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Well, I'll just I'll say one more thing. Maybe two more things quickly. Firstly, about women in Stanley Kubrick's films, it seems to be like a philosophy of the elite that they hate women, and in every single film of his, it's extremely vulgar. And I honestly wouldn't even recommend people watching them, except unless you're the noble sort who can endure the pornography and etc. Eyes Wide Shut, etc.
Yep.
And this is way off topic, and maybe you can talk a little about it in the show. I've noticed pictures on them, historical, I guess, Renaissance period pictures. Some of the faces seem like they've been scraped off and replaced with a different face on them. I believe I heard about this reading online a long time ago, and it comes to mind that, I would usually research things on my own before asking you, but I remember something about Hermes or something in the Trismegistus or that cult. And I was wondering what the connections are, if you've heard about this group of people. And, it kind of, if what I believe is correct, it seems like part of their religion is, the destruction of beauty. And in that, I've noticed it's always been a beautiful woman's face that they scrape off and put on a less pretty face. So just talk about that a little if you could. And I appreciate it so much, and just have a good night. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And thanks for calling. There's no doubt about it. I could go on actually so much about even just the movies and the things you don't see in the movie unless you use special filters and so on, and the symbols that will actually appear on people's faces. One of them is Indiana Jones, and of course the actors are totally unaware. This is obviously done in the studios, but you'll see lots of phallic symbols in the shadows of the neck and the face and so on. And this works on the subconscious level. And one fellow actually did it, a very good documentary on this, and it showed you what you were seeing. He blew them up and filtered them, and my God, it's very, very incredibly explicit with so much occultic symbology all through it. We're talking about an ancient brotherhood, basically, put it that way, that's existed for thousands of years. And we get the traces down through times, as I've mentioned before. You'll get it through the Greek philosophers who all trained in Egypt pretty well, and who all were given the same image of society. It's very much Hinduistic in style, in that it truly believes in a caste system, a natural caste system. And even when you go down through the ages, you'll find the same characters coming out in front to try and to reintroduce their perfect utopia where everyone knows their place. Socialism, of course, was one of the big champions of it and so on. But they do definitely tamper with everything down through the ages, great portraits and everything else, because you got to understand that the great artists, as they're called, were always had patrons. The patrons were always very incredibly wealthy people, members of the high brotherhoods. And basically the artist had to please his master. Technically, artists are prostitutes. It doesn't matter what type of art you're into. If you want to make it big, you have to prostitute yourself according to what your master's demands. And that goes for music as well, by the way. And most are very, very willing to do what they're told. If you go into, say, Leonardo da Vinci, he was given special permission by the Pope to dissect bodies, take them apart, which for anyone else was desecration of a body, and that was a crime, a capital crime. But of course they made an exception for him because he was one of the special chosen. And that's why he was also privy to a lot of even more further ancient history to do with science than he let on about, of course, but it came out in his drawings and stuff. So you're looking at a very occultic system down through the ages. Symbols, everything's a symbol to them. There's a whole language of symbology. And that's why members of the groups, regardless of what country they came from, could always understand the same language by reading the symbology on walls and the steelers and that kind of stuff. So it's still used today. It's all around you. It's everywhere you look, actually. It's in all parliaments. It's in the U.S. Congress, and you'll see the fasci and all the rest of it. There's nothing there by chance. Very, very, very ancient. The Roman Curia at one time had the fasci, the Roman church that is, where they walked holding the fasci, the bundle of rods around the axe, and there's about 6 of them in a procession around the Pope at one time. And that at that time was ultimate power. And the symbol, of course, is that if you take one stick out of it, yeah, you can break that stick. You tie them together and try to break it over your knee, you'll break your knee. So it was strength, unity through numbers, or strength through numbers into one. We're all one. Many are one. But they've used the trick of arts all down through the ages to trick everyone into a sort of forward-looking direction. When you look into the different levels of art too, and the time periods they give you them, and they name them for you, Baroque and Rococo and so on, they're actually giving you systems that are shaping mankind, because you're altered mentally by the system in which you live, in the generation in which you live. This hasn't stopped to the present time, by the way. And it's a tremendous effect on the psyche. That is, everything around you has a tremendous effect on the human psyche in ways you don't even know it's happening to you. Today it's into technical stuff. It's almost a sterile environment. It's emotionally sterile, in fact. although you're allowed to stimulate all the basically desires to the ultimate now. But when you stimulate the desires and you take away any beauty from anything around you, you end up with a very cool psychopath or a sociopath. And you're also ready for destruction. People fight and die for things they love and can relate to. The land, even the building types around them that ordinary people live in, that's what they fight and die for. When you take all that away and you put them in a concrete jungle of squares and no beauty whatsoever, and you give them electronics and that becomes their focal point for all their attention, then you're literally taking away the human part of the human being. And they're being programmed to think almost like a computer and react like a computer with no emotion or very little emotion. And they cannot relate, in fact, once they've been through the indoctrination system within the school system, they can't relate to even what you're talking about. You are now the barbarian. You're the old man in Brave New World, where the created humans, the so-called advanced ones, tolerated the barbarian and thought he was rather quaint with his ideas of having a partner and a mate for life and having children, where they've been taught, of course, they could have a different partner every night. In fact, it was mandatory. You couldn't sleep with the same partner twice in a week, which again was tried in the Oneida community in New York in the 1800s, by the way. But anyway, you're looking at an ongoing system that understands how your mind works and how you perceive visually, how you perceive auditory, even smells. Everything is catered to, and you don't even know it. People haven't got a clue. They don't know it at all, that they're being shaped by very intelligent people. I'm not talking about computer programmers. They're a dime a dozen. I'm talking about the people way above that on the higher levels of science that also work with, is now called neuroscience and neurolinguistics, and even neurosymbology, because we work more with some symbols than we do with actual words nowadays. So these high artists like Kubrick and so on, and many others, know how to put these things into their movies, and they do degrade women, because women, they say, have one function, and that is to pass on the progeny of superior types. That's really what they believe. In fact, you'll find traces of it in Pike's books for Freemasonry. Freemasonry is a front for another religion, by the way. It's a Gentile front. And they talked about the same thing, that whatever, they would change the world through the female psyche, because the female will adapt to change quicker than males were. Males were far more conservative. The women will try something new if there's mass persuasion. And they said, too, that they would stop using tailor-making the cultural changes for different countries. Like, we'll try this in one country, but the culture is different. He will try that. He said, whatever will work on the female of the one country will work on the female of the other. That's what they'd already found out by the 1800s. So the end of the family unit was to come. We've got that. Has happened pretty well. We went through the 80s where it was single-parent housing. It was getting built all through most of Europe's countries by the government, by mandate, because they knew darn well, they already knew, they were absolutely certain that they would not take mates for life, because they'd been conditioned that way. And all entertainment, of course, augments that too, and basically conditions them that life is just one happy string of lovers, one after another, until they get rather old. They feel they've missed out on something, and then they've got psychiatry to take over the big gap in their lives, and lots of pills. All discussed, by the way, back in the 1920s. All of that I've just talked about. Discussed back in the 1920s at very high level think tanks and so on. So we've gone through it all, generation after generation, until we live in a generation of total degradation. And those who are involved in degradation don't know they're degraded. They quite enjoy it, because when you take a country down towards the end, it's no different than Rome. Anything goes, everything's promoted, satisfy the senses, and you're oblivious to what's happening around you, and you won't stand up collectively to fight for anything which is right, because you don't know what is decent anymore. And these characters, they make it up to the high movie level. Kubrick, of course, knew, as did Clark, that 2001 was to be the kickoff. That's why he wrote 2001, The Space Odyssey. It was to be a kickoff for a brave new world. The next novel was called 2010. That's really when the countries of the world would see the great change. This was a century of change, where they start unifying all the monies and the systems of the world under the United Nations. We're living through an agenda, and it's very occult to those who have not eyes to see or ears to hear. Back with more after this break. Hi folks, we're back, cutting through the matrix, and I'll have to dig up that link if I can find it, where the guy shows you all the different shadows in various movies. And these are obviously put in after, when they make the movie, and the actors are oblivious of it all, and you wonder why that little shadow is there. It seems out of place until you blow it up and look at what you're looking at, and it's very, very clear what you're looking at. Incredible sexual symbology everywhere, even in shadows on people's faces. But we'll go to Bob from Texas now, if Bob's there.
Alan, how are you?
Not too bad.
Still waiting for the literature, but hey, I think we're still on the same page, so I've been doing a lot of reading. Anyhow, you're talking about all this symbology and so forth. I was going to ask you some other things, but as this went on, I couldn't help but think about the Bin Laden death coinciding with the May Day Eve that the Druids find, ceremonial type thing, and then Hitler, of course, being supposedly killed on the same day, and how they're promoting that, and.
But it doesn't really matter, because they probably had him frozen for the last 10 years.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I just think it's kind of strange how they would bring it out on this day. It almost seems like, too, that there might be something they're diverting you from.
Everything is diversion. Even that story is diversion. Whatever really is happening today will come out maybe in a month's time from the Council on Foreign Relations, to do with some global agreement that was signed that we heard nothing about. That'll be the real story.
Right, that everyone was focusing on this and maybe the birth certificate issue and this sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's utter. The media are literally a media that can agree globally to censor all radiation news on the same day and implement it on the same day. Why would you trust them about anything?
And then, you talking about the rain, like strategic raining.
Yep.
They have the capability of doing that. They've had that technology for years to seed the clouds and put rain where they want it. It's not like it's anything new. And, so people, and then watching this thing, I just can't believe how people can sit there and see, watch the media with this and just not think anything about it. It's just one lie after another.
It is one lie after another.
And then, you mentioned about, of course, the big wedding, the big royal wedding, and that's such fanfare. Unbelievable how, there's a patriotic sense here in America for Britain, and seeing little kids. I was in Austin the other day, and I saw little kids wearing the Union Jack T-shirts, and, I mean...
Here's the thing with people. See, people really want to worship other people.
Yeah, it's a fairy tale thing. It's a fairy tale fantasy, like you say. Everyone. And then I noticed too, and I caught glimpses of it on the news. You can't help but see it. It's all over the place. Of how the princes, these two modern day princes, are much different from Stuffy, Prince Charles, and of course that puts him more down to earth. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Kind of appeal to the different culture.
Oh, sure. I mean, that's why they start to breed up again, because they were inbred, and it showed in Charles. But then they got Diana in. But you'll find their natures are just the same, by the way. Their natures will be... And by the way, I mean their real natures. I'm not talking about... their natures will show, and their real preferences will show down the road, because it's tradition with them.
Okay. Thank you so much, Alan.
Thanks for calling. But Hamilton said it too. He said, if people really want to worship a king, they've got to worship somebody, but they prefer a human being to worship. And unfortunately, lots of people do. That's what celebrities are all about, you see, and that's why the big boys use them. From Hamish myself from Ontario, Canada, is good night to me. Your God or your gods go with you.
The elite's religion, in that they're the destruction of your conscience into a psychopath, and it kind of, they also, take snipes at the dumb soldiers, how they, born to kill, and one of them actually says, "Has I am become God?" The character named Animal Mother.
Yep.
Yes, I am. That was Oppenheimer actually, but I see it kind of like a little snide joke.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Well, I'll just I'll say one more thing. Maybe two more things quickly. Firstly, about women in Stanley Kubrick's films, it seems to be like a philosophy of the elite that they hate women, and in every single film of his, it's extremely vulgar. And I honestly, I actually saw Full Metal Jacket recently. Again, I'd seen it when I was younger, but I never saw it with a discerning glance. And he actually hails Satan in that movie. Have you heard of that? Like full on.
What did you say?
I'm sorry.
What did you say there?
Oh, he hails Satan in the movie. In one of the backdrops, one of the Vietnamese sayings in the back. Have you heard of that?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was blown away, and there's just so much you could talk about on that issue. The whole concept of the soldiers. It seems like they're going through a satanic, like a metaphor almost of.
They are pulling the Western countries right down to the bottom. There's no doubt about it. And the US just has to finish off paying taxes, sending drones across the world to bomb folk and making missiles and so on, and supplying the military and the taxes that go with it all. They're just going to finish off a few countries across the world, and that's the last job they got left for them. There's no work to go home to. And that they're pulling the plug from underneath them. The rug from under their feet, as they do it all. I've said this was their technique for years. Why? Because it's been done before in history in other countries. Now, I'll go to the calls now, and there's Derek from Pennsylvania. Are you there, Derek?
Hi there, can you hear me?
I can,
Surprised, Alan. It's actually Clarence. I'm a friend of Derek's.
Yep.
And I first of all wanted to say, I saw Order of Chaos. It was an incredible movie. It's, very vulgar, very new agey, in that or new age morality rather. But it's an incredibly good movie, and I just wanted to say that. And if anyone wants to check it out, they really should. But it's not something they should give to their kids, because
that's right.
I'm sure you could say that.
Actually, their children now probably have seen worse at school.
Yeah, right.
I'm not kidding you.
Yeah. Yeah, I can relate. I also wanted to say, you're talking about, in the beginning of the show, you talk about how you need a little extra change. So if people could, people who have more, I personally am broke. I've been thinking about sending you a few quarters, at the end of the month, in my bank account, but anyone who has more, they could really help out, and it would be helping me and all the others who are listening. As well, maybe if someone wants to send you a question over the web, maybe send you a couple quarters or something.
Yep.
You could talk about it for a little while.
Yep, that's right.
That was just on my mind. And I wanted to ask you a few questions after the introduction. Stanley Kubrick, I'm sure you have opinions on him.